Okay, it's 7:29, Tuesday, September 19, 2017, and I'm going to convene the City of Ojai Building Appeals Board in session. We'll start with a roll call. Anyone?
Chair Daddy, or not Chair.
Not Chair Daddy.
Member Daddy.
Just a sign. I'm present. I'm alert.
Member Murphy. Here. Member Farmer.
Here.
Chair. Over.
Present.
And I'm present.
Very good. Okay, so we have a quorum. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Would you like to lead us?
Yes. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so we'll open the public communication portion. But however, actually, before I open it, I'd like to say, make an apology on behalf of the board and the Ms. Mario, the building official. The last meeting of the Building Appeals Board, a video was fortunately not switched on. There is an audio record, so apologies to the community and to the archive, so to speak. So we'll open the public communications, which is a time set aside during the Building Appeals Board meeting for members of the public to address the Building Appeals Board on items of city business other than scheduled agenda items. Matters raised at this time may be briefly discussed by the board and will generally be referred to staff and or placed on a subsequent agenda. Under state law, other than for emergency items, no action on non-agendized items can be taken at this meeting. The one speaker card we have is from the adjunct or temporary liaison.
That's item 3.
Okay, excuse me. In that case, then, this is from a citizen, William Wyrick.
Nope, that's agenda item 3, though.
Oh, excuse me. In that case,
Yeah.
you don't want to speak as other than. Okay, my mistake. Are there any other members of the public who would like to comment? Okay. Then the next item we have is the building officials report.
Good evening, Chair and board members. At the last meeting, several questions came up, and for lack of a better place to place the items and the answers to your questions, I placed them in a building officials report. They may help with further items on the agenda. We'll see where it leads. It's an experiment tonight. One of the questions that came up in the previous meeting was, what is the processing time allowed by state law for an accessory dwelling unit? Is it 120 days from submittal date or 120 days from the date the application is deemed complete? I asked Mr. Summers, the city attorney, for an answer to this question, and his response was that the ADU compliance program, it is 120 days from the time the application is deemed complete. The ADU program, it's 120 days from the date of application. So there's a difference between the two programs.
Would you be kind enough to go back and read?
Mike?
Would you be kind enough to go back and re-articulate that again?
The question was the processing time allowed for the city to make a response on an application. My understanding from the city attorney is that for the ADU compliance program, formerly known here as the second dwelling unit compliance program, it's 120 days from the date the city deems the application complete. For the ADU program, if you were building a brand new ADU, it's 120 days from the date of application.
Okay. Would I be correct then to say new construction and conversion? If we're looking at the compliance, we're looking at something that is.
Correct.
If we're looking at an ADU, it should be something that has not been started.
Correct.
Okay? So if somebody comes in, they want a garage conversion, we have 120 days from the time they drop it off at the front desk to get everything back, and they can convert their garage, minus the corrections and the other things that they need to bring in, if any.
Yeah, the city has 120 days to act on the application. Doesn't necessarily have to approve it in that time, but it has to act on the application in that time.
Thank you.
Another question that came up was...
Excuse me, I
yes,
actually have a question.
Sure.
When did the second unit, the formerly referenced second unit compliance program, or second dwelling unit, or
I think we're
Several
calling it
names.
the ADU compliance program
when
now.
did it become the ADU compliance program?
I don't have an answer to that.
Okay, has it been changed relative to the paperwork, the documentation that formalizes the process for the public out in front of the window?
The city attorney
department?
has reviewed the guidelines and has listed it on the handout, which I can give you. His wording is second dwelling, parentheses, accessory dwelling unit, end parentheses, compliance program guidelines.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Question?
I can answer the question.
Oh, fabulous, answer.
If you look at the date of the revision, I think that's published on the compliance program. There's a revision date. And that revision date reflects when the council passed the changes to the non-conforming or ADU program, and then in compliance with the new wording of state law, the council put in the fact that since the state law is moving towards calling them accessory dwelling units, we changed the wording to be synonymous between second units and accessory dwelling units. And the council passed that resolution, which amended the program, and the effective date is when it changed then, is when the effective date of the revisions. There should be an effective date of the revisions on that document. So if that answers your question. It was council-driven, and the effective date of the change, which is not the date it passed, but the effective date in the resolution that the council passed, would be on that document, to answer your question.
Okay.
Excuse me, wouldn't it be critical? Because this is kind of like our little cell tower fiasco. We now have a new shot clock.
Yes.
So
and I
when you
believe
go
there's
ahead
a
and
new-
change it, we got a 120-day shot clock on one. The other one is just whenever we get around to it, but we got that 120 days.
Well, again, all of that is subject to, it's a legislative act, basically, to set those time limits. So either by state law, by default, or by council action. So again, that's something subject to action by the council.
So, in other words, in the handout that is available to the public at the front counter, it should let them know that there's 120 days on the part of both them as far as a timeframe in which to perform upon both the city once it's
Yeah, I don't
deemed
know
complete.
my memory isn't good enough just to
I'm not
pull
seeing,
it out.
I'm not
I
seeing
do remember there
120 on
being
this at all.
I do remember there being a deadline, a timeline, but I don't remember. I can't remember the date.
And I have one that I picked up 3 months ago, and I'm looking at the current handout, and they're not appreciably different that I can see. So at this point, okay, we have an answer relative to what the city attorney indicates is
Yeah, and
the
the council
practical
actions, but-
parameters, but
Yeah.
as far as notice to the public for
Well,
this
that's
program.
a different matter, but I just thought I'd answer your question.
Yeah, okay,
about
very
the-
good, thank you. Okay,
Okay.
Councilman Haney's here, so I'm not liaison anymore tonight. I'm just commenting on item number 3.
thank you.
Let's see, a second question that came up was, did any applications for the accessory dwelling unit compliance program units occur between the date of March 8th, 2017 and April 25th, 2017? And the last date that we have received any applications was March 8th, 2017. There was an issue on page 6 that was brought up with the application, and that's been fixed. Had the wrong program ending date, which I believe you brought up. And I have the report, which was requested that we add a column for application date and sort it by application date. So I have that report for you. I'm good. Let's see, also at the last meeting, the board made a motion to recommend that the appeals fee was currently too high, and they suggested $200 for the appeals fee. I wanted to let you know that right after the meeting, I met with a consultant that the city has hired. They're doing a fee study, and I specifically brought this fee up to ask him in his fee study to look at that, and he did think that it was too high, and he'll come back with another recommendation for that in his study.
Can I make a comment? If I could get my liaison and Mayor Pro Tem's attention? Thank you. Liaison, I'd like to make a comment. Our building official just made a pretty important statement. And that has to do with the building fee. The building fee in a city of 4 million people in Los Angeles for an appeal is $161. The appeal fee here in Ojai is $500. It's absolutely ludicrous. It appears that we've set that bar so high as to discourage the majority of the 700-odd non-compliant units we have out there actively rented from not coming forward. And it appears that we need to do something a little bit different. It appears that asking the consultant to come up with a number, I think, violates the law of California. What the law of the California says is the city cannot charge fees above those actual costs. We've gone through this fee schedule a number of times in the last 15 years. You know, we've looked at them, we've had our little arguments, we had them before city council. So I really kind of want to figure out when we have a consultant come back with a number. We recommended 200, that's not legal. But when it does come back, they're going to have a basis for what the fee is based on what's allowed under state law. So I would hope that we would all kind of make a note on that. And Mayor Pro Tem, I'm sure you want to add on to that.
Can I just respond quickly with a procedural comment? Fee schedules are approved by council, are recommended by staff. They are supposed to be based on costs. I was just talking with the liaison. I believe it's been almost 2 years now since the fee schedule has come before us. And so you are appointees of the city council. So I would urge you to, if you feel this is, agendize it and make a recommendation for us to consider when the fee schedule comes before us.
Then I would ask the building official, when do we think that we'll have an opportunity to hear from the consultant?
I haven't heard back from him. I haven't had a date. But I can find out for you.
Okay, and what I would do is I would like to ask the chair, if that we don't hear back in 6 weeks, that we agendize the item and we make a formal recommendation to the council without the information coming back, because information in this town seems to take years sometimes.
And to clarify, that relates to a recommendation to council for building appeals fee.
Can I speak?
Yes.
Correct. And did you take a vote, or was there a motion on that $200 the last time, or was that a number that was just thrown out?
They took a vote.
Okay, thank you. Well, I missed a meeting.
I wanted to ask, since it's supposed to be according to cost, do we have an idea what the cost is?
Well, that was one thing that the consultant did mention, that it's supposed to be based on cost, and he would look into it.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I note, since Board Member Daddy made a reference to the City of Los Angeles, there was an article in the LA Times regarding just that specific issue, and a consultant or a member of I believe it was the planning division of the City of Los Angeles had determined that the cost for the city to process an appeal for a planning issue to the Planning Commission was in the vicinity of, I believe it was $12,000 or $14,000.
But again, that's the planning commission. We're an appeals board.
Exactly, and with the intent of perhaps supporting the ability of an appellant to make an appeal without onerous fees, there's in the interest of the community. So, okay, do we want to, do we need to?
I have another question that you had. I have an
Very good.
answer for you.
Because I also have a question about one of the answers, so, great.
Okay.
Please proceed.
One of the questions was, why is the appeal hearing for a building appeals board 45 days when all of the other appeals seem to be 30 days? I did ask Mr. Summers, the city attorney, about that as well. He could not find any specific rationale. His thoughts were that because the Building Appeals Board didn't have a regularly scheduled meeting time, that maybe they needed more time to schedule the meeting, maybe because of the technical nature of building appeals. But he said there's no set in stone reason why, and if the Building Appeals Board would like to bring that back to council to change, you could.
Could we get the specific language? I think the specific language says something that an appellant has 10 days to reply, and the city has 45 days to reply.
I think it was in here.
It doesn't appear that our citizens should be so crammed down on their ability to get involved in the appeal process, where the city machine has got so much more resources and so much more time. It seems that it's an obvious unequal contest.
It says here, the appeal shall be filed with the building official no later than 10 days after receipt of written notice of the determination and the appeal provisions of this chapter. And then the next paragraph, it says, within 45 days of receiving an appeal, the building official shall schedule a hearing before the Building Appeals Board.
I feel those should be the same. I feel that no citizen should be at a disadvantage in this process. So I would like the chair, and I'll make a motion if you like, or I'd like the chair to discuss it amongst the members and find out 45 versus 10. You have an individual against the city and staff. I think that's blatantly unfair.
I can check and see what the other appeal processes are within the city and bring that information back to you if you would like. You know, I don't know for Planning Commission, for the other appeals, what the time period is for the applicant. I do know that the city, according to Mr. Summers, all of the other response times from the city is 30 days as opposed to the 45 days.
And I think because with the Planning Commission and the HPC and all the other ones, those are all appealable to the city council. There's no appeal except a superior court from the Building Appeals Board. So I find it blatantly unfair that there's a 10-day versus 45-day where every citizen can go to the Planning Commission. If they're not happy with the Planning Commission, they get another bite of the apple with the council. And the people going to the Building Board don't. So I just find that it's this incredibly disadvantageous for a regular citizen to get involved in the process based on the no appeal to the appeal and the time frame. So whatever you want to do with that, I don't feel I'm doing my job representing this community by not evening up this process.
Yes, Tom?
Yeah, I agree with Bob. I think, when you're looking at the second unit program, you've kind of dealing with a mom and pop situation. Whereas the planning commission's usually dealing with maybe an architect or an engineer. But I really think on the second unit program, it should be more than 10 days. And in all fairness to those coming in for the second unit, 10 days is just not enough. Reason being is that, like I said, I think you're dealing with more of a mom and pop type situation, somebody, a homeowner, as opposed to somebody coming in for the planning commission.
Somebody non-represented by a professional the majority of the time.
And it could be observed that there's a disparity in the response period allowed as between an applicant and an appellant and the city in which to respond. And given that these are subject matter are determinations by the building official, the basis for that determination should be readily available to both the building official and the city, and not necessarily require a great deal of research or preparation for an appeal. So, someone have a motion on this, or do we consider this discussion something that we need to agendize for a future meeting?
I'd like to agendize it and allow, as I said before, 6 weeks.
Okay.
We have an offer by the building official.
Right.
That is already looking into this. I don't want to disregard any efforts that are currently being made at our request. And I
Good.
believe that we should give them sufficient time to get back.
Okay.
And I would like to broach one other item when it comes to this, because it's all the same item. To my knowledge, this has not happened in a long time, a few years. What is the appeal by a citizen that goes in and asks for an appeal and is told no, which we've had happen? What is the process for that? Can anybody tell me what the process is? Somebody goes in and says, I want to appeal the building appeals decision, and they're told no. How can that happen? Anybody, can anybody enlighten me on that?
I need you to clarify that, Bob. You're saying appeal. You can't
I'm
appeal
saying
an
somebody
appeal.
went in and talked to the
Once you have
building
a judgment
official.
from appeal, the only appeal is to Superior Court. You don't have an appeal process.
No, they said, I want to get an application to the building appeal board, and they were told, no, you can't appeal this. My understanding is they can appeal anything. We may not have the authority, but I just want to know what happens when somebody goes in on one of those things.
I'm not sure, but how many appeals have we had?
One,
Okay.
In 4 years.
You think we're beating this thing to death or not? I'm just trying to say, I understand the reason to get clarification, but I'm just trying to say you have one appeal in 4 years. I think agendizing these items that you really feel strongly about, it would be the best way to expedite in getting answers, is get it agendized and get it back to staff and get an answer as quick as you can. Even on your first one, on the first agendized, I don't think building and safety needs 6 weeks. I think you can say by the next BAB meeting that she should be able to respond.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would do, but I'd get it agendized, you guys.
It says here in our packet, any involved person may appeal a finding, decision, or determination made by the building official.
to whom, Dale? I know what that
To
says.
this board.
Well, that's
Says
not
whereas it
happened in the
filed, all
past.
appeals to the Building Appeals Board must be filed with the City of Ojai's Community Development Department. So they would go to the Community Development, and then they were turned down, you're saying? The person was turned down?
At that time, yes. And at that time, our appeal application was to the Planning Commission
Oh,
because they haven't converted.
oh, well, there some changes need to be made. Okay.
Okay, before we go into something else, I just wanted to comment, the the handout in response to the board request for a filtered chronological application date and status relative to whether it's pending or final for accessory dwelling unit compliance program activity, which commenced, the initial entry is 11/13/13, and the final entry is 3/8/17. Indicates that during the year 2016, there were 3 applications, and during the year 2017 to date, there are 4 applications, of which 2 are final and 2 are pending. So since that comes up later regarding council-assigned tasks relative to the recommendations for in furtherance or support of the second unit compliance, accessory dwelling unit compliance program, the activity sheets that I'm seeing either indicates there aren't anyone interested, or there are, or very few people interested, or there are significant barriers to the application process. And also reference to Councilman Haney's comment regarding how many appeals this board has deliberated. When there are so few applications or so few appeals, I don't know that a conclusion can be made that they're not needed, or that there are no interested parties relative to applications for permits, but rather that there may be barriers that are significant to the public's entrance into that, both the appeal as well as the permit. Excuse me?
Such as the cost.
Such as the cost, or the process, or the city's programs not being clear enough to the public what's involved and what their expectations should be or could be. So that was one observation regarding this handout, which we'll be using, I'm sure, going forward. Ms. Mario, did you have a response relative to my request regarding that, or comment regarding whether the city had any program or forms or applications beyond a standard building permit for anything besides the accessory dwelling unit compliance program?
No.
Okay. All right. Okay, you had some other?
No, that completes my report.
Very good. In that case, then, let's move to,
Consent items.
excuse me, consent items, yes. So we have before us consent item, minutes of the Building Appeals Board meeting of April 4, 2017, and item 2, minutes of the Building Appeals Board meeting of August 1, 2017. Does anyone have any comments regarding these minutes before we vote?
Yeah, I was not here for August, but I was here for April. We brought up a few items in April, and I'd like to revisit at least a couple of those to make sure where we are on those.
Very good.
And you're going to have to pardon me for not being here the last time. They may have fixed it. We had a discussion about seismic activities and the need for considering 27-inch footings. And my neighbor moved a 160-square-foot tough shed and was required to put in a 27-inch foundation, which, due to the seismic activity or lack of it here, I thought the discussion for us in Ojai was to not adopt that. What happened? I see where
I spoke with several soils engineers,
okay,
and I spoke with the county building official and a couple other building officials throughout Ventura County.
right,
And after listening to them, I really feel that it's in the best interest of the construction in the city of Ojai to continue with the 27-inch deep footing standard, which is throughout Ventura County because of the nature of the soils here. So I changed my mind, and we discussed it at the last meeting.
The August meeting.
Yeah.
And did the board concur with that? That 27-inch was necessary? I think at a certain point in time, when you're looking at a 160-square-foot tough shed,
I thought we deferred.
that gets to be a little overbearing.
thought we
That gets to
deferred
be
that.
thousands of dollars of extra cost, or we have the egregious over-excavate the entire lot, and with the over-excavation, because of the alluvial basin with these giant boulders we have, that is gonna
27-inch
be-
deep footings is not an over-X and recompact. 27-inch deep footings is just digging 27-inch deep footings.
No, I understand that, but you can do the 27, or they could have done it what we were told at the time, which could have been wrong. It was a different building official, different time. That they-
There's no equivalent for 27-inch deep footings.
Yes.
Point of order. I'm trying to find this discussion item in the minutes.
Page 6 of 8, August 1.
Page 6 of 8, no, August, I thought we were talking about the minutes.
It came up,
April 4th.
it came up.
Up in April 4 first, and then it was.
But you're discussing the minutes of April 4th, not August. So did you guys approve the minutes of April 4th so you could move to August?
We haven't done it
That's up
yet.
for a consent item as well.
Consent item 1 is approval of board meeting minutes, April 4th.
Yeah, we're still on April.
Okay?
4th.
Number 2 is approval of board minutes, August 1st.
Correct.
Two separate things. I'm looking in the minutes of April 4th. I'm trying to find 27-inch footings in the discussion.
Me too.
Where is it?
Ah,
That's what I'm trying to find. Because I don't see them. Now, if they were discussed in August, then let's discuss them in the August minutes.
okay.
That's all I'm trying to say. I'm
Okay.
not trying to say Mr. Daddy's wrong. I'm just
No,
saying we're...
What I said was I wasn't here for the August meeting,
Right.
and I'm trying to find out where they went,
Okay.
so we can pull them in. So if these things need to go in August, go ahead back to the April and do what you need to do on the consent to get that done. As long as they're in August, we'll pick it up then.
Okay, very good. What else was there? Is there anything else then relative to April 4 minutes?
Couple of spelling errors, but Tim Wyrick. So I'm just talking, if there's, the April minutes has a couple of spelling, but that's it,
I'm fond of
referring to Tim-
depth
Tim Wyrick.
on the last page, 8 of 8 on April.
I don't think we had a Tim Wyrick, but anyway, Mayor Pro Tem.
Moving right along.
Okay, well, there's two items on the consent calendar. So at this particular point, are we addressing them individually or conjunctively?
Because of absence.
That's what my understanding was. So at this point, we want to take a vote on item number 1.
Do we wish to approve the April meeting? Is that it? The
Yes.
April minutes?
Yeah.
I make a motion, we approve the April minutes.
I second the motion.
Okay. In that case, then we'll take that. We need a roll call for that, or just a voice vote?
Okay,
Roll call, please.
Member Daddy?
I wasn't here for the follow-up discussion, so I am going to abstain.
Abstain. Member Murphy?
Yes.
Member Farmer?
Yes.
Yes.
And yes, myself.
Okay. Consent item number 2, minutes of the Building Appeals Board meeting of August 1, 2017. Since there were, is there any information that you have for us relative to requests made at that meeting? No? Okay. At this point, since you were absent from that meeting, is there anything you'd care to address relative to the minutes?
Yeah, I'm going to get back to that 27-inch. I think that's, being somebody that was the manager with State Farm when we had Northridge earthquake and got to see what happened in that thing and got to see what didn't happen here. And I insure homes going back to the 1860s and 1870s here. We have not had damage in this community in 140 years when it comes to earthquake. We just have not had it. If you're going to go ahead and allow for 27-inch footings, I would think that we're going to get into collateral damage when we get into junior ADUs and other types of things. And I think when we're building 2 stories, you're building other types of structures. That's fine, but 160 square foot tough sheds, that seems to be way over the top. There needs to be some type of limit. This can't be prescribed for everybody.
Commissioner, Member Daddy, if I can.
Sure.
For 1 second. My understanding is that item's on the agenda later today as part of the amendments to the building codes. So as far as the minutes discussion, we shouldn't get too far into
Okay,
that.
if we're going to discuss it later, that's fine. I just didn't want to go on a consent where I thought I asked the question, said, was that approved? And I was told in the affirmative, yes, it was.
No.
But if it had not been, we're going to discuss it. I'll discuss it then. Thank you. And if you're going to call roll call, Dale,
Yes,
I'm going to abstain,
you're going to abstain.
being absent.
This is for the August minutes for approval. Member Murphy?
Yes.
Member Farmer? Chair Orley?
Yes.
And myself, yes.
Okay, so, the next item is item number 3, discussion item. Proposed schedule to address 5 tasks assigned by the City Council to the Building Appeals Board. Recommendation, approve the proposed schedule to address the 5 tasks assigned to this, by the City Council to the Building Appeals Board as listed in Attachment A. So, I believe that is,
Oh, you ready for me?
yes, item number 3, discussion item, public comment.
I wanted to reiterate that the inclusion of the tasks as passed by the council, another one of the tasks that was approved by council was for Councilperson Haney and myself to follow up the work plan to flesh out the tasks passed by resolution of council. There was also a part of that resolution for work plan. We collaborated and circulated that back in July, and that does have dates on there. And I understand you can't necessarily hold to the dates that, I believe we circulated this work plan to you back in July as well as to all members of the staff and everything. And there were no objections cited for the circulation of that work plan. And so what I would suggest is when you make your modification, to report back to council as to why, or just a report back to council, since there were dates in a work plan from council, that you report back to council as to the revised schedule, explain maybe what the issues are in following that work plan that was initially circulated, and just stay in communication with the council with respect to the entire matter is all I'm saying. And I think that would be important and well advised. And the importance of this, for example, I'm going to give one example that there was one of the priorities that was assigned by that work plan in terms of an early one was to come back with some discussion about the second unit program, or the accessory dwelling unit program. And that's going to come into sharp relief because one of the major impediments for the financial impediments for the non-conforming program was the connection or capacity charges assigned by the Ojai Valley Sanitary District, upwards of $17,000, which our city attorney believed were not legal. We responded to that opinion by not requiring will serve anymore. We issued some permits that have been in process under that guidance and by resolution. The sanitary district continued to pursue those capacity fees. And at the state level, Senator Makowski, the author of the original SB 1069 bill, who thought he was covering everybody, and that was his intent, put together a follow-up bill or a cleanup bill called SB 229. That bill has now been engrossed in both houses of the legislature, enrolled for the governor's signature. The passage vote in both houses was overwhelmingly in the affirmative, and it specifically calls out special districts to emphatically clarify that special districts are not to charge a capacity fee for things like our accessory dwelling unit nonconforming or amnesty program. And furthermore, that any capacity fees that are assessed, if they don't fall within the definition, have to be according to only two metrics: fixture counts or square footage, called out in the bill, called out in the law. On both levels, the sanitary district's current ordinance does not comply with SB 229, which Senator Wachowski's office, who I've been in direct touch with, believes will be signed by the governor by the middle of October and will go into effect January 1st of 2018. So it's become timely because the continued assessment of the capacity fee is an impediment to our pursuing the council-approved policy goals of the housing element in terms of removing unnecessary financial impediments to things like accessory dwelling units. So it has a direct effect on our ability to pursue our policies if they're not following state law. And I can tell you that Councilman Haney and myself have requested that as soon as the bill is signed by the governor, the next available meeting, a demand letter will be drafted and presented to council for consideration to be circulated to all agencies that they please, on the effective date, which will likely be January 1st, 2018, please comply with the state law. Therefore, with the removal of what we hope is a removal of a major financial impediment, we have the opportunity to restart and re-energize our accessory dwelling unit program. It's important and vitally important to the city because every one that we can legalize is a plus on our RENA numbers without building anything new and without putting any new demand on our resources. And so this is a policy goal, and it's important, and so it's a task delegated to you, to please look at ways of getting this program going again, and that's why I would suggest that when you redo your calendar and look at it again, just report back to us as to where you're at. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to say, Bill, thanks for the from the community, you and Mr. Haney, for pursuing this and bringing this out. I mean, it was probably something that would have been swept underneath the rug, And I think because of this, it will bring more people out.
Yes, I think when you're wanting to legalize non-conforming unit, and you're looking at a few $1,000s maybe, except for the $17,000 for the sanitary district, for the sanitary district to state publicly that that's not a financial impediment defies reason and logic.
Yes. Well, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I would just like to mention or tell you why I proposed this schedule. I proposed at the next meeting we discuss promoting the accessory dwelling unit compliance program. The council had wanted us to act on that quickly, and I think that we can. The November meeting was, I would like to talk about the Title IX rewrite, because that sisters up to the code adoption that we're discussing tonight. If we can get that approved, then I have 2 months to finish. I've started rewriting it, get that Title IX rewrite done so that we can go to council with our code recommendations and get our amendments adopted in the city. In December, CAL FIRE has agreed to come to a Building Appeals Board meeting and talk about the fire map. They could not come any earlier. That's why they are scheduled for December. So that's why I'm recommending December. And then I just put the other two items sequentially for the next 2 months.
And once again, who was that can't make it until December?
Cal Fire,
And where are they coming out of? So this was conveyed, that information, that availability was conveyed to you by Ventura County Fire?
I requested it, and Ventura County Fire contacted Cal Fire, and that's when they said they could come.
Okay. All right, let's have some discussion on this relative to the tasks, the protocol, and the calendar.
I would make a request that since we have a formalized calendar for a time certain in the future, that we generate and give us about 7 to 10 days worth of information on the agenda prior to the meeting. So it's not we get it here. I mean, we've had these things come in on Friday and have our meeting on Monday. And it would really be beneficial, since we know what we're going to talk about and when we're going to talk about it, that we start getting the October 17th nuances in. If you would like, we can fire off some of these things and say, hey, could you make sure you research certain things that are going to go with this, just so we can give you a heads up and we don't have to rehash it.
That would be great. Send me information. Remember to send it to me, so we don't have a Brown Act violation. If you send it to me,
Oh,
I
yeah.
can research,
Oh,
and we're good.
Okay, anyone else?
I think these look okay.
Okay, I'd like to
Not to.
make a note of that what was copied and circulated by Councilman Wyrick follows what's in our packet relative to one of the sheets, but the second sheet, which is dated the same date, 7/16/17, makes reference to a council work plan draft, Building Appeals Board 7/16/17, and makes reference to protocol, 4-item protocol, and a 7-item council assigned request. So this has also, on each of those requests, has a target for completion date, which we will not be able to meet because we're getting started on this much later than the end of July or the beginning of August. And while a proposed calendar for the 5 items that are included in our packet and dated 7/16/17 produces an outcome of us meeting once a month for the next 5 months and addressing each of the 5 initial items rather than these, what can be seen as the council-assigned requested 7 items. So I don't know how to cross to integrate these 2 lists, and also from a practical perspective, the protocol that is referenced seems to be somewhat different than we're following here at this meeting even tonight. So as I understand it, these meetings that have been scheduled on the
Third Tuesday.
excuse me? Third Tuesday, thank you. Would have us meeting at 7:30. Is there a reason for that?
I'm unavailable earlier than that.
Well, that's regrettable, because from a practical perspective, this is the latest meetings that I'm aware of the city has held. So from a practical perspective, that appears to be a reflection of your unavailability, makes it into, I would characterize it as an inconvenience to the members of this board to meet at 7:30, especially if it goes for an hour and a half or 2 hours.
The other day, I suggested that the council chambers are available are Fridays.
Okay, did that get circulated?
It did in an email when we decided on Tuesdays.
Okay,
Was the date discussed?
no, the time, I
mean,
think, is the
time-
issue.
Was the time discussed, though, when you brought that forward?
Yeah, well, 5 o'clock on a,
Friday.
on a Friday is also, I would characterize it, from my personal life, that is not convenient on a regular enough basis that I would decline to follow that. So this basically leaves us in a situation where we're going to be inconvenienced. How do, anyone have any issues with that at this point in time?
I think what we need to do is speak faster, get more detail, make sure we're doing our job so we can get through this.
We'll try to keep that in mind.
And I guess what I heard that I didn't hear the solution to is we have a number of items here and we have a number of dates. Council has a number of items that are different in sequence and different dates. And there seems to be an importance to collate those things because we represent the people and serve at the will and pleasure of the council. And therefore, I think that we've got our first meeting, let's go for it, we understand what that is. And then somehow, I'm not sure if the building official, the liaison, and the chair, you're gonna work that out and collate the council letter with what our tasks are and get those out to us so we can go ahead, and we do not have to wait for the packets as a board to start doing some independent research and make sure that we're well prepared and can go through this stuff. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, I believe it is, from my perspective.
So can we just approve these next 5 meetings and move on?
Approving the first meeting, and the next 4 are going to be probably updated.
Calendared based on our deliberations and outcome of the first meeting.
Okay. Shall we approve the first meeting for October
Guys, you need your mics.
17?
You need your mics on.
Mike's.
My mic is on. Sorry, I'll try to speak more directly into it. Shall we approve the first meeting then? Is that what we're talking about? For October 17th? We're going to,
Unless council liaison or council has an objection to this particular calendar, because they have a different guideline, and they have a different dates, and they have different priorities than are put on what's before me.
well, can we ask them to come up and tell us? I mean, let's get on with this.
Just real simple. We said for you guys to have the discussion and then just come back to council and let us know what your changes are. So it's up to you guys, not up to us. Okay?
Okay?
Maybe a motion to, like you said, set the first meeting.
Uh-huh.
And then the follow-up part of the motion is for the chair and the building official and the city manager to get together and discuss the other
Okay.
meeting times, and that'll help get that back on the agenda.
I'd like to second that motion.
Okay.
You want to make that motion, Dale?
Yes.
Yeah, you'll need a first.
Whatever he said, that's what it is. I'm not going to try to repeat it, except that we're going to approve
I'm going to
this-
make a motion that we approve the first meeting
Okay.
and that the principals in this discussion get together and collate the rest of the 2 agendas together so we can satisfy the council's
I
request.
second that. We're going to take a
And
roll
this
call
is making reference to the September,
to the October
October
17th.
exactly. So at this point, the October 17 meeting. All right. We have a motion, we have
and I
a
have a
second,
second.
and we have roll call for a vote, please.
Yes.
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 Member Farmer,
Yes.
Bullock, and myself, yes. Okay, moving along.
Okay. Item number 4. Proposed amendments to the 2016 California Building Code. Recommendations are to review and finalize the recommended changes to the proposed amendments to the 2016 California Building Codes based on input from the Building Appeals Board at the August 1, 2017 meeting, and recommend approval of the City Council of of amendments to the 2016 California Building Code. Turn it over then to the building official.
So based on the August meeting, I made the amendments that we spoke about by deleting some of the text and changing an error that I had in the roofing classification. The changes are highlighted in blue. So I'm asking that the Building Appeals Board review these. This third time I brought these recommended code amendments to the Building Appeals Board, and if you approve them, then I will incorporate them into the Title IX rewrite and bring that back to you.
Okay. Do we have any discussion on this item?
I read them all. Let's see.
Having not been here, I probably have the most to discuss. Why do we feel that we need to have? I'm really uncomfortable, except for climate, geology, and topography, about going above state law. I am a horror to that. I just don't like it. Why are we extending time past current state adopted language on renewals and allowing extra time? It seems like I am going to be on attachment A, suggested additional codes and appendixes, and I'm going to look at the proposed Ojai language in blue.
Page
1.
1 of 13, and what it says is, the building is authorized to grant one or more extensions, that's interesting, for a time of additional periods not to exceed 90 days each. I don't even know why you needed to do anything, because it doesn't say that the building official can't extend 50 of them for 90 days each.
Well, that's actually the problem, is that if you continually extend permits over and over and over again, you could have a structure that's under construction for years.
We have that. It's at the Gables. They had a dozen-year permit with nothing going on. And so I'm going to ask then, if that's what the issue is, why is the remedy something that says not to exceed? They're going to have 180 days plus another 180 days. That's a year. And I think that, you know what, that's just not reasonable. I could see the 180 and maybe the 90, and then we're on with it. They either get into the project or they get rid of the project. But we have people that go on and on and on with these projects. I've been here long enough, and a few of you have, to know that we had a 15-year construction project by Franklin Street on the west side of the street where the guy jacked up the house. And he had a 15-year construction project going on that never got called. And finally, they knocked it down and they put in condos there, put a little VMU thing in there. But that thing went on forever and ever and ever.
Under current state law and the state code, that can continue today. Without this amendment, those kinds of projects can continue forever. There's no limit on the extensions that projects can receive.
Okay, well then, I'm going to be quiet then. It doesn't seem that this is, I don't see the relevance of this, so I'll just move on. If they can have unlimited extensions, then the time frames don't matter, correct?
Well, we're proposing to limit the number of extensions they can have.
And so what we're saying is we want to limit this to 1 year, is that correct?
Correct.
And if we're halfway through a project and they're not done and they're making changes, that's for council. That's a different discussion. Okay, I got that one. And again, this runs over into the permit, and so the permit is kind of the exact same language, isn't it? On page 2. So that is exactly the same thing where if the original plan specifications for such work provided and that such suspension or abandonment has not exceeded 1 year. And so is that 1 year then solid? Is that a real date? The 1 year when they suspend construction, is that a real date where the city can actually act?
Yes,
And-
that's the date from last inspection,
Okay.
or permit issuance, whichever date that is.
Okay, so that was that Gable thing. They did a walk-by every 6 months for 12 years, and they issued another permit. 12 years. Okay. If we're gonna do these things, let's make them real. Let's make sure they do something. On the refund, again, this is problematic for me. I mean, we're gonna know when somebody this is page 3. We're gonna need to know, or we know, when somebody's coming in, whether they're gonna move on this thing or not. And I'm just kind of, I'm questioning the 80% in 180 days, which is a significant deviation of what our current language is. Can you enlighten me as to why those two changes are
There's no
necessary?
current language.
Well, it says the
the-
building official is authorized to refund, and here it says.
No, it says I'm authorized to establish a refund policy. Do you really want me to have control over establishing a refund policy?
Well, I think those gentlemen in the back there would like it. 80%, are we allowed to garnish that 20% by law?
Yes, because we've spent time processing the application, filing the application, and handling the paperwork.
Okay, if we're gonna do that, what we do is when we file, process, look at applications, we make people deposit a fund in the city. And what we do is we bill them to that fund until that fund is depleted, and then we tell them to proceed on with the permit, that they need more money, and we go ahead and we do that. What I'm
This
saying
city
is-
does not have that type of permit system where people come in, make a deposit for a permit application. They just pay a straight fee as based on the adopted fee schedule, and that's how we recover the city's costs.
Wow, I'll have to go back, because that's not what I've heard from a number of people, is they put amounts of money in, and then there are fees against that. Is that a different process?
That's a
I'm
different
talking
process. That might be the stormwater inspections per the city adopted fee schedule. They do supply a deposit, and we bill hourly against that. But for permit fees, grading fees, the adopted city fee schedule is a flat, well, it's not a flat fee, but it's a set fee per the project.
about? Page 5.
I actually have a question on that particular item. So this is CBC 109.9, and I'm still referring to page 3 of 13. So I always like to look at limiting language. The building official may not authorize this is the proposed Ojai language. The building official may not authorize a refund of any fee paid except upon written request filed by the original permittee no later than 180 days after date of fee payment. Is there a particular policy goal around having a 180-day limitation on a fee?
Because based on our permit expiration, it would expire 180 days after issuance. So if someone is applying for a refund on an expired permit, most cities don't allow that.
Well, but it says of any fee paid, so it could ostensibly be for a fee for other than a permit. Could be for an application fee.
The building code doesn't have application fees. We have permit fees for building permits.
Okay,
You submit an application and then you issued a permit with a permit fee.
okay, so then the policy is based on the theory that if an individual has been issued a permit and they haven't acted on it and it's expired, they're not entitled to ask for a refund.
Correct. Oftentimes, we will go through the records and expire permits, so there's additional processing that happens. They get scanned, they get put into public record once they're expired. So to unexpire a permit or refund a permit that's been expired creates some issues.
Okay.
Page 5. I'm in a I'm going to ask that under CBC 18094, which is your second bracket, and table 18097, that we keep our current code of the 12-inch. And soils engineer is going to be responsible for doing the soils test. And so the engineer needs to be responsible and figure out what's necessary in the expansive soil. I listened with extreme interest to find out that they have a project over on Fulton Street now that has incredibly expansive clay-based soil that will not even allow for percolation of a permeable driveway. And so those are really the responsibilities of the engineer to do that soils test. I built at the country club in San Luis Obispo. We had to dig a huge pit. We had to flood water in there 3 feet in depth. We had to do all these other things because of the expansive soil. And again, to go to just a blanket, we're going to get into these little 230 square foot junior ADUs, and we're going to be doing these extra expensive things. At the same time, we're trying to roll everything off. So I would like to not see a change of what we currently have on the depth of the footings. And I think if the building official will help me, we went through a discussion a number of months ago, 6 months ago, where we discovered that you could actually put a wood sill on the foundation. So if we can put a wood sill, I think blanketing a 27-inch under.
If you look at the amendments, I did eliminate the possibility for wood foundations in the city of Ojai.
No, I understand that. Today, wood sill is approved, and today 12-inch. And I'm asking that we accept the wood sill. I don't have an issue with that, but I want to reject the 27-inch. So I'll leave that to you people for discussion. Do you actually understand what I'm requesting?
Well, you're leaving everything to the soils engineer for each individual project, right? Is that correct? Because some places.
I don't have a problem with the mud sill or the wood sill. That's where they put adobe and they build a house on it, or they throw a log across, like the log house that we had that burned down 2 years ago.
Mhm.
I get that. But to put in a 27-inch foundation, other than those areas where the engineer knows it's expansive. We had to move Fulton Street. We couldn't build Fulton Street. Fulton Street collapsed and failed. We, on the complete streets, we had to redo all of the trees because we knew there was so much clay and expansion. We had to come up with a different species of trees that could actually thrive there. So those things are known. But to put this blanket all the way over where you get to Mr. Quillis's house, where there's nothing but rocks in the backyard, 27 inches gets to be tough. The other thing is when you go down to 27 inches, we're going to have inspections on antiquity and artifacts.
Yes.
And we're going to come in with some other issues.
Mhm.
And so
The
I don't
historic
wanna,
building code has specifications for historic buildings that are not in the building code, and I didn't make a recommendation to amend the historic building code. So for historic buildings, they follow the historic building code.
No, they always do. I mean, that's always a separate law. Even with the shake roof, that's a totally separate law that we can't touch. What I'm talking about is when people start going down 27 inches for a 10 by 20 foot, a 12 by 12 foot home, and they go down 27 inches, they may be uncovering additional issues that I think are going to be an undue burden on the population. So I'll let you figure out what you want to do with that. I'm one vote.
So to clarify, there is not a standard policy for soils engineers or soils reports on additions. Soils engineers and soils reports can cost people a lot of money. So the building code doesn't require them unless the building official does. So the standard code right now does not require that if you were to do an addition to your house that you would have to provide a soils report. You would just have to dig the 12-inch footings. Throughout Ventura County, what they have said is provide the 27-inch deep footings or get a soils engineer to come up with a different suggestion. So if you have a small project, the 27-inch deep footings aren't that expensive. If you have a large project, a new development, a soils engineer could possibly save you money with getting around the 27-inch deep footings.
So are you saying that you either do the 27-inch footing or you get a soils engineer to prove that you don't have to?
Correct. If you want to save yourself some digging, yes.
That's proposed, that is not current.
Oh, I understand.
But it may not be cost-effective, right?
To get the soils engineer?
Right.
No.
Right, right. Just curious, Renee, what are other cities in,
Every other city in Ventura County and the ones that I know of in LA County and Orange County all require 27-inch deep footings. I have not worked in a city that does not.
And again, I kind of want to keep Ojai. You can go ahead and use cast pipe, I believe, to hook up your spa in Ojai, where you don't have to use the plastic. I mean, I've just not seen the need. I have in a lot of areas, but not here. But that's for you folks to.
You're saying the soils engineer is very expensive? Is that what you said?
Yeah, they're usually pretty expensive. I'm not quite sure what they cost, but they're usually more expensive than a little extra concrete and a little extra digging.
I don't know.
Is there
how
a
to-
comment from,
That's not an either or. It's an option.
My name is Dan McLaughlin. I'm a contract building inspector / retired building official. Just to kind of back that up, that's pretty standard procedure everywhere. I work in Calabasas. They require a soils engineer, or you provide concrete that's 4,500 PSI. Just another way of doing it, but it's pretty uniform in almost all your cities. You either have to create exemptions for your little buildings, those type of structures, or you have to do the soils report or whatever other fashion you do it, whether it's stronger concrete, deeper footings. But she's right, it's very standard almost everywhere up and down California because of the seismic zones we all live in.
And if we were going to go ahead and adopt that standard, then adopt the rest of the standards. You're in Ventura, you know that permits are not required for auxiliary buildings up to 160 square feet in the city. And we have a limit of 120. So if we're going to play the game, let's play it even with all the same numbers across the board. That's what I'm saying. So if we're going to do some carve-outs, let's do some carve-outs. Let's just don't paint everything with the same brush.
Yeah, and then the only thing you have to worry about is even if you exempt certain size structures, what is it today and what is that structure going to be tomorrow? So, you have to really think it out, the whole process, because your shed tomorrow could get converted to something else and now it doesn't have a footing that's big enough. It's going to cost that applicant a lot more to have to fix that up. And hiring a soils engineer versus me doing 4,500 PSI, which is expensive, it's way cheaper than hiring a soils if I'm doing a room addition or something small. So it can be to your benefit to go 27 inches. It really isn't that hard. In Calabasas, it's bedrock, and I'm doing basement garages where it's all in rock, and the foundations are extremely large, but they're all done through a soils engineer and structural engineer. But they're in bedrock, so they're still required. It's just the state we live in. Everybody's afraid of earthquake, and when you have those larger footings or stronger concrete, you're in a much safer situation. But like I said, your little sheds and those type of things, that's a tough one. And most of those, don't you know that there is a design. Those companies have their own designs for their footings. And it doesn't mean you can't go hire another structural engineer to go over that. But they have their own standards of the type of footings. Just like people are using cargo structures now for buildings and homes, there's a way that you have to fasten those down. And believe me, the footings in the corners of those, they're massive. And
Right.
why? Because of our seismic.
They did that at Oak Park High School. And so what I would ask is that we reject it and go back and make another recommendation, because 160 square foot shed is not convertible legally to a junior ADU. So again, if we're going to do this thing, let's make sure that we look at the numbers, we do them correct, and we don't revise it over and over and over. Very simple.
So are you suggesting that we put a size limitation on that?
Oh, absolutely.
Or would you want to suggest one?
No, not tonight, because
Okay.
this thing is just too broad. I want to look into it and see what we're going to do on these ADUs. We have a lot of people that have an expectation that they're gonna build something similar to a tiny home, but on a foundation. And they're gonna be affordable, and they're not gonna be crushed by the sanitary fee and all these other fees. They shouldn't be crushed by extra
So what's the
construction
minimum?
fee.
What is the minimum for a dwelling unit?
What is it, 236 for an ADU? Is that it? About 236? It's in here. I read it earlier. And so, 236 at 12 by 12 is
144?
is 144. 20 by 12 is 240. And so, you're getting pretty close to what that standard is.
Right.
And if we want to exempt under 400 feet, I'm okay, but I don't want to have those non-convertible structures, like Boyd Ford had to put in a 27-inch foundation for a tough shed. That was, I thought that was it was too much. Now, if you want to have the city go ahead and adopt all the rest of the rules except for the one rule they didn't adopt from Ventura, which is 160 square feet for these standalone sheds without permits, that's fine too. Just figure out what we're going to do and make it even and equitable for everybody. It's not. And this is too broad brush.
So we're not going to do that now, tonight?
Well, I have one vote. I don't have a,
Do you want to make a motion?
I would rather have information that everybody has, so we're not asking, what's this, what's this, what's this? Get you the Ventura. In 1987, we adopted the Ventura construction laws except for two things: the size of the auxiliary, and we did not adopt design review for second story. They don't have design review for second story, and they don't have the other permitting for these other size buildings. So I'm just giving you that off the top of my head. You really need to see it in print.
Okay, one other consideration regarding that, though, since this would be a uniform adoption, is this would be applicable to additions that may be fairly minimal to existing structures that may be following, may have followed, or even predated the current depths on the on table 1809.7. So that would be a consideration relative to.
So currently, if you did an addition to a structure, you would have to show from an engineering standpoint that the structure either stands alone, or if you're attaching it to the existing structure can handle the additional seismic load. So it doesn't really affect the size of the footings on the existing structure, because you're having the analysis of the addition done either separately or in conjunction with it. So you're not going to be, in occasion, you do underpin an existing older structure depending on the size of the addition, but not often. Most engineers choose to make the addition stand alone.
The 236, which is convertible.
Right, but once again, that's assuming it's engineered by someone who's an engineer versus a designer who is by law able to design up to a certain size. And I'm considering not the underpinning question, but the question of if somebody wants to build a 180 or 200 square foot addition to an existing structure whose foundation predates, the addition's going to be a heck of a lot better, both from a seismic structural perspective, and as well as the foundation already, apparently. Since these standards of depths have been in place for a long time, and they do address weighted expansion index. There is that aspect too. If there's going to be any limitations to this, whether you want to try to make it consistent with what the current state adopted language is, or so. Okay.
We had a foundation issue when that massive pine tree, oak tree, whatever in the world, it was an enormous tree, fell on Paradise Artists and smashed the entire building. And so we had a difference, and the difference, it took them 3 years while they considered what the depth of the foundation should be before they could rebuild, based on what the old was and the new was and what the addition was. And I'm trying to avoid that fiasco again. It was a miserable experience for 3 years for those folks. But, you know, they went through it. So before we make further changes, I'm just pleading with this board, understand the cause and effect, understand what it will do, okay?
So,
I'd rather delay it and get more information.
well, do you want to make a motion?
Yeah, I make a motion that we delay this subject and leave it as the current 12-inch until we bring it back as the calendar allows in the future.
Okay.
At the same time, we're handling the request of the council, or put it after we've completed those tasks that the council has asked us to do.
That's a long time away.
Okay.
And your reasoning, Bob, is because of the size factor?
My reason is because I insure the 1894 Summit School. I insure the 1879 Hall Place. I insure a number of these places that have none of these advantages and are pristine units within Ojai Valley.
Do we have a second?
I second it.
Okay. Member Daddy?
This is for postponement.
Yes, this is for the motion that you made.
Yes, for postponement, yes, to continue.
Member Daddy?
Yes.
Member Murphy?
Yes.
Member Farmer? Chair Ulrich, and
Yes.
myself, yes. Okay. So we're postponing that until we have more information.
Well, until we develop a little bit different plan and work with the building official. And if it's something that everything below 236 or a junior AD is exempted, as Judy Murphy figured out, then let's come back with something that we can actually look at and understand.
Okay.
I would like to suggest that we put that earlier on our calendar. I don't think we should hold up this whole process for this one item, so I would like to see it go off
Maybe
at the top.
So would you like to see that back next month, or do you want to see it in 2 months? When would you like to
1
see
month.
it?
Yeah, right away.
Next month, and thank you. Are there any other
Let's see
items,
where my notes
proposed
end.
amendments?
I would ask for clarity, because I think I'm the one that made this original request. I went through this and I read it again and I read it a third time, and now I'm really unsure as to the 50% and where we are and what we're doing. I kind of thought on the roofs, as we get later into this report, on the roof report, that when we had a Class C roof, and a Class C roof had in excess of 10% damage in a single incident, that they had to go to a Class A. Is that correct? I got that. I did not, and my understanding was I did not include Class B roof into the 10%. Is the Class B included in the 10%?
The language says here, the entire roof covering of every existing structure or more than 10% of the total roof area is repaired or replaced with any 1 year period shall be fire retardant roof covering that is at least Class A. So it doesn't mention what the existing roof was. Everything is included.
So B is included. Well, that may be a little bit further than I wanted to reach. What I really wanted to reach was 100% of all shakes. That was the main thing, at 10%. Class B is pretty much a statewide approved roofing material, if I'm not incorrect. And it is fire retardant, and it is fire resistive, and it's generally asphalt shingle, correct?
It's more fire resistive than Class C, but it's not considered a fire resistant roofing.
Like a tile or a cement.
Correct. I mean, a Class B roof is, like I said, more fire resistant, but if you talk fire resistant, that's Class A.
I would, for the sake of the community, I think that, except, and this isn't going to be, this is going to have to be in conjunction with our fire map. The state of California says we will have a moderate, a high, and a very high fire map. For the city of Ojai, we've omitted the first two. And so if we're going to get into the classifications of roofs, I would think that if they're in a high or a very high, only Class A roofs be allowed, and then the removal of the Class B would be included. For the rest of the community, when you're on Lower Drown Street, I don't see any reason, because it would be in a
This
moderate
was
or
your
no
proposed
zone.
language based on that April meeting, so if you want to make a
Right.
suggested change, let's make a
That's-
suggested
that's-
change.
That's what I'm doing now, but I'm not sure if I can make that suggested change since we don't have concurrence from the fire marshal that our fire map, which is from 2010.
Then we won't be able to discuss this until after the December meeting.
Okay, that's fine. We need to get the fire map done. That fire map is
Then I'm a little confused as to what we're doing with this. We're discussing the 27-inch deep footings in October, but we're postponing approval of these recommendations until after December.
no, my thought was we would approve everything except for the two that we're going to postpone.
I need to take a complete package to the council and for the Title IX rewrite, so it doesn't do us
And-
much good to do partially.
Okay?
It's entirely up to you when you want to discuss each item, but the complete code amendment, because we have to have a public hearing.
Okay, I
So it
would
needs to
just
be a
as soon
complete
we
packet.
postpone it. This was supposed to be done in 2010. And since it didn't done in 2010, and we're coming up on 8 years late, I don't know where 2 more months will bother us to get 2 items correct that have a very large financial impact on the residents of this community. I am not going to sacrifice people paying large extra amounts of money for expedience. That's my personal preference. You have to talk to the chair.
Jane.
She has to sit. You need to come to the podium.
That's not Jane.
No, you
Do
just
Do I have to
just-
touch
Just
anything?
pull,
make sure the
pull it in
microphone's
front.
on.
Pardon me?
Just make sure the microphone's on. It's on, good.
Okay. Everything that you're talking about tonight makes building in California wildly expensive and building in Ojai even more expensive. I want to make a comment about the extensions on a building permit. The state doesn't have a limit as to how many extensions you can get on a building permit. I'm in the process of doing a construction on my house. It's been going on for a long time. Had to get a design review permit, which is where you put in money and then they keep asking for more money.
Yes.
And when you ask for, when I asked, after they told me I owed them even more money, and I asked to please get, in writing, I wanted to know what I was paying for. It took a month to get a list of vague things. There's no way to tell if I paid for things more than once. I was charged for publishing in the newspaper twice when they canceled the meeting. I mean, it was just on and on. I just ultimately paid it. A year later, I got another bill. I'm wondering for the entire time I live in Ojai, will I get a bill every year? I just don't know, and there's no way to qualify that. Before we put a shovel in the ground, I had to get a soils report, even though we built it for the worst possible condition. I was told I didn't need one. Then they said, oh, please get one for $2,300. I spent $30,000 before we put a shovel in the ground. I did architecture in New England for over 20 years, and I never paid a fee like that. I haven't done an architecture project in New England for a while. So I called a friend of mine and I said, this is what it costs to do a project here. I haven't done anything for a while. Can you tell me how that relates to what you pay? And he goes, I'm so sorry. because he couldn't believe how much money it cost me for everything that I did. And when you go in to get this building permit, and you say to them, I really need to know how much this is going to cost me to know if I can do this project. Oh, well, we can't tell you that. It goes on and on and on and on. And I'm not the only one who feels this way. I guarantee you there's plenty of others, and I know people, I've said to them, please keep track of everything you spend, because it's really important that we take a look at this. So my comment about, I'm sorry to go on for so long, it's a sore point, but my comment about the extensions is that I'm now on the second part, and there'll be one more part if I win the lottery. I mean, I paid $30,000 before I could start this project. I may need, I'm old, I'm going to retire soon. I may need an extension of more than 1 year. In Massachusetts, when you pull a permit, you have 3 years to start it, not 1 year. And I think that I would like to see you not put a limit on how many extensions you can get. I would like to say, if something major changes in the building code, you look at that. But for somebody to pay that much money and for the construction to go on, and that was wildly expensive too. What happens is that the only way somebody can do a project here is if they have endless amounts of money. It really changes the nature of your town and what happens here. So I would like you to really consider the extensions and see, if there is cause, give people a break. I mean, we've been building now, I've been working on this project since 2014. It took me a year just to get it to the Planning Commission, who approved it in 10 minutes. And every single step of the way, it takes a long time and everything gets more expensive. So the state's bad enough. Please don't make it worse in Ojai. That's all I have to say.
Could before you step away, could you give us your name and address?
My name is Bobby Corbin, and I live in Ojai.
Thank you.
And she's one of our planning commissioners.
Yeah, she's a planning
Thank you for
commissioner.
your service.
It was for the record. Thank you.
Thank you for
Corbin.
your service. Okay, I'm going to finish this. We are 8 years behind in doing this, and I don't believe a couple months longer to get it right and make sure that our residents don't have these exorbitant extra costs is the proper thing to do. The order on 229 went out of the Senate 39-0 with, I guess, one senator in jail still, so we only have 39 instead of 40 votes. So they got them all, and it does go to the governor's desk in a couple of weeks, and so my neighbor had to spend $35,000, of which $17,000 was the sewer, and that was for a 640 square foot building. $35,000 without that first shovel, as you say. So, I'd kind of like to get Title IX done. I've wanted to get it done for 5 years. I think we're going to have to know what we're going to condition on the fire. We need to know how severe it is. It's a joke, this fire map that was accepted in 2010 without high and moderate. It doesn't go from a desert to a very high between neighbors, and that's the way we decided to do it. And this thing is blatantly incorrect. So if we can just postpone these things and come back and take the couple items, get those things knocked out as quick as we can, and have the board do some of their own homework on their own and look up some of these things without violating the Brown Act. If we send them all to the building official with questions, and then they can be directed out, we can start. We don't have to wait. We can start coming up with an idea and an opinion now, but I don't want to see the small homes get stifled, and I don't want to see some other things get stifled.
And I would also like to see the time extended. From what Ms. Corbin just told us, I think we need to consider that.
Okay, you have two other items on this list. CMC 104.5.3 or CPC 104.5.3.
Page.
It's page 11 of 13. And then the re-inspections on 12 of 13. Are there any comments or,
Roof coverings.
excuse me?
No, I'm just reading.
Yeah, here we go. Here we start at the very top of page 11. CRC 902.1.2, except areas designated as a moderate fire. We don't have a moderate hazard zone.
I deleted the exception.
Pardon?
I deleted the exception. The code language has an exception. I deleted the language.
Okay, and then again, as I stated on those areas that are not in a high, and we have no high, but those areas that normally would not be at risk, I want to allow them to keep their Class B roof. We've had tar paper, asphalt shingle roofs forever, and that would be an entire deletion. And I think what happens with that deletion is we're going to get into structural values where we end up, blowing everything up to save it. So then we're going to make sure that they're going to have to retruss. They're going to have to build the upper end. They may have to build the lower end. They may not be able to take the roof load. And so my point
Okay.
is not to overburden. I
Right.
believe the state has done that for us enough, and I don't want to add these things that are unnecessarily overburdening.
Okay. So, anything relative then to roof coverings in all areas, fee refunds, or re-inspections? Okay. So, at this point, we have, we've already had the motion, the second, and the vote on continuing. Do we have any other? Mr. Quillisi?
Thank you, Chair. My name's Steve Quillisi, and I live on West Eucalyptus in Ojai. I would just like to suggest procedurally that you go through and identify individual items within the table that you have that you want to reconsider. And that you, if you all agree on the balance of the table, that you make a motion and pass it to approve all but those individual items that you wish to reconsider. In that way, you can give the vast majority of all of this to the building official, and she can begin the rewriting of Title IX, only pending your decision on 3 or 4 or 5 items. Thank you.
Okay, so, that it would be a different, motion.
Can we make a motion and cover both the items?
Sure.
Yeah.
That would be an amendment of the motion.
Do I need to make that since I made the motion?
I think so.
Okay, I'm gonna ask for amendment of the motion that the fire map, the roof, and the 27-inch be held for further consideration, and that the rest of it be allowed to go through.
And the time extension. We should be more than 1 year.
The extensions and the fire.
Okay. Is it, okay, we didn't have a discussion on the time extension.
Yeah, but we should.
And I asked that, and I didn't get any input from the board on the time extension. And
But-
I cited the Gables as 12 years, and now it's going to go to a year. And can the building official help me? Doesn't the building official have the ability after the 180-day, 2 180-day time periods to re-extend, or will this thing be written in Title IX and it will prevent you from extending past 360 days for all causes?
So I want to be clear that the time extension on a permit is either from the application date or the date of last inspection. So let's say you were building your house 3 months in after you pulled your permit, you call for a footing inspection. That inspection resets the time clock again. So you're working on another 180-day period with the possibility of another 180-day extension. So each progress, each milestone that you meet when you pass an inspection gets you the other 180 days.
No, we're not going to do that, because here's how this thing is going to work. When you look at an inspection, you're going to see there's a half a dozen inspections. So we're going to have the footing inspection, we're going to have the nailing inspection, we're going to have the insulation inspection, correct? Correct. Okay, so we're going to have 10 different inspections. That's 1,800 days. That's enough time to build a home, 1,800 days.
Not if you've completed one section and not another one, and you've spent $400,000 and you need more than a year to gather the money to finish the project. You spent $30,000 on a
Okay,
permit, you
then
don't wanna get-
I would.
So if you had a building permit that you pulled, let's say, to build a 3,000 square foot house, and you were going,
140 square feet.
and you were going to build a portion of it and live in it, and then start the portion of it again, you're still working on the same permit, you're still working on the same plans, you're still, so there, you would not be getting an expiration day. Every time we come out to do an inspection, you would get another 180 days.
However, by the time this second one is done, it's probably going to take me more than a year before I can finish the last piece.
But it's not the finishing, it's every time I come to do an inspection, you get,
Yes.
the time clock resets.
That's correct, but would you really want me to put 2 pads in and wait 6 months, and then put 2 pieces of steel and wait 6 months? And
Stay
have
with the
nothing
state line.
up
That's,
there?
that, you can't help it. I mean, you know, if that's the way someone wants to work the system, or what they have to do, that's what you have to do, but we're trying to prevent.
I think a year's not quite enough.
Well, you know-
I have not run into a project where I've had people wanting to continue construction, that it's gone more than a year. I've had military folks come in and say, hey, I'm being deployed, I'll be back in 9 months. Fine, they get an extension, then they got another extension. I've not ever expired a permit for someone who was legitimately under construction.
I'd like to add something too. Most banks, unless you're building a house with cash, most banks have a limit on the time, and it's usually 1 year. They want you to build that house within 1 year. Well, a home equity line to build a home, you've got to have a pretty good size home equity, and you've got to have a good amount of cash in there as far as equity. A lot of people, I'm not saying, but I'm just saying, when you do, when you get a construction loan from a bank, they usually put a limit of 1 year. They want you to build that house in 1 year.
Okay, for the sake of discussion, I will agree in my amendment to reconsider the time limit and let the building official get on with that small portion that we have agreed should be written, so she can at least start a little bit of work on that small portion, and then we want to rush these things through, and I think it would be incumbent upon our chair. I know the 26th council meeting
Was canceled.
is canceled. It would be incumbent upon our chair to go to council, give a bad report, and ask them what their pleasure was. Because this is an important item. The other items we can kind of figure out, but this extension of building, I mean, I see we have a building in the middle of the town that has not had anything done to it for 2.5 years, and we're very patient, depending on what the projects are. So if we're going to be fair to commercial, we need to be fair. This is just a fairness issue. We're not going to blow away or burn down if we give an extra 6 months, one side or the other. So I would put that in my amendment, and I would ask that you call for a vote.
Okay, we have
We
a second?
have a second? Yeah, I second it.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yes, Member Daddy?
Yes.
Member Murphy?
Yes.
Member Farmer? Chair Ulrich, and
Yes.
myself, yes. Okay.
Okay.
Oh, we have someone in the audience that's wanting to.
Go ahead.
Don't want to kill a dead horse, but I run into a lot of people that are in her situation. I don't know of a building official, and I've worked probably 5 or 6 in my career that run into this situation. The intent of the 180 days and the one is to keep people from letting projects just sit dead and become a code enforcement case that you don't want. So most building officials are going to work with these people. If they expire the permit for any reason, the fees don't go back unless the code changes. And that's why people submit plans before a code is going to expire and turn to the new code, because now they're out, like her, if she was to do phase 2 and her permit expired and the code changes, that new building has to comply with current code. Building officials don't want to see that, so they work with people. So it's not a big deal. Some cities actually go to a 3-year period now because they're trying to work with people. We understand people have financial problems. It's not that we're out there to be punitive and trying to, get every penny we can. So, it's kind of like, treat me like I want you to treat, kind of that attitude.
And I
So-
do understand that, and the word is most. I don't like most. What I want is every. And so what I really want is I want every citizen to be able to read something reasonably written
Right.
where they have their rights that they can reserve and have the language, and it's not most. Because I've seen some building officials, and I think our residents need the protection of having something that they can count on rather than most. And I really don't like it when we have certain kinds of things that come up. And we do have personality issues. We've had some. And they haven't worked out well for this community at all in the past. So I think that we need to give Bobby here and the rest of the residents that are going through this stuff, which is gruesome, absolute written assurances that they have a guarantee that they can complete, rather than trying to find a friendly
Building
a
official.
code official that will cut them, quote, some slack. Cutting some slack where you do with one and you don't do the other, I find is blatant discrimination. And if everybody's treated the same and we've got a fairly written rule, I would rather go with the fairly written rule. So we'll consider that time.
The intent here is to justify an amendment to state building code. State building code, as was referenced at the beginning of this, allows for unlimited extensions, so we're going to try to find a fair and equitable place between the recommendation and between the state building code at this point to land the city in, for our recommendation to council. So, all right, is there anything else? Any other, okay, I believe at this point that it's the Building Appeals Liaison Report. Councilmember Haney.
I have nothing to report other than, good evening. I have one question for you, though. On your, what you're gonna take up on October 17th, I put a little side note on here, just to get the ball rolling, is what information would you like Renee to provide you in a timely manner prior to this meeting? So, for instance, I don't know if any of you have seen the AB 229 literature.
I looked at it.
But I'm just saying, so, if that, if some of this has to do with the sanitation district, you guys might want to take a look at that. Just information to have. So, that was my only comment, is if there's anything you need, obviously you need to contact Renee and see what she can provide you. And obviously, like Bob has said all along, you need to do some research, if you can yourself, along with all the other things that you do on a day-to-day basis. And with that, I would say thank you for all that you do. And I didn't think you were going to do it.
Less than 2 hours. We've
But
got
you
a
did
couple,
it.
we've got a couple more minutes.
You did it.
Before you adjourn, Chair, I would like to bring something up for discussion, because I think if we're going to do our homework for the 17th, I really need our building official help us set some guidelines and some definitions and give us some areas where we can explore. My understanding is, and I've talked to a number of people on, not this board, but I can reach out to planning, we're gonna be looking at some things, which is my belief, of owner-occupied primary units where second units are put in. I believe that's a state consideration. I don't believe that 1069, 229, or even the next one, SB 35, are going to change where you have to have an owner-occupied resident, a covenant on the property. That's what I believe is going to happen. What I am uncomfortable with is resident and what a resident means and what the definition is. If I look at the homeowner's exemption law in the state of California, and not the $75,000 homestead exemption, but the $7,000 property tax exemption, it's very clear. You must reside in the house. It must not be rented. This must be your primary. You get a tax deduction on your property under penalty of perjury. You get a tax deduction from the state of California, the IRS. You get a tax concession from the assessor's office and from the collector's office. And I think that we have been, in my more than 2 decades here, have a tough time actually defining anything that can actually work. And so I would like to know how the city definition of owner-occupied reflects in what we need to do with ADUs, because when we have, and I've listened to a number of council, when we have somebody that lives in Bel Air in one home and they have a second unit here, for the homeowner's exemption, this is not their primary property. If it's not their primary property and it's not their resident property, it appears to me that they cannot add an ADU for rental. And I think what we need to do is run that thing down the rabbit hole, all the way down. So when we come back on the 17th, we have an option. We have a clearly defined definition that is somebody else's, not ours, that can stand up to the law and work this thing. Is that fair?
So the item, as I understand it, is for the Building Appeals Board to make recommendations for promoting the program. Not necessarily analyzing the program itself, just making recommendations for promoting the program. So I will be happy to provide any information that helps you make recommendations to promote the
Right.
program.
And specific as to what is owner occupied. Because as I look at my list here, and I look at the list of the residences that have got second units, they don't live in those houses. And we have people sign, and I've seen Dale notarize, where people swear that that's their primary residence and they're living there. Yet it's not reflective of what's actually happening with these permits. So, just a thought.
Well, in any case, before we adjourn, I believe that there is a planning commission report.
Well, I'm the liaison tonight. I'm
Okay.
not quite sure what my oral report is supposed to be. We haven't been to this board before. Do you know what my oral report's supposed to be?
Whatever you consider is appropriate to convey.
What have we done that would be of interest to the BAB?
Well, I don't know if we have anything at this point that would be of interest to the appeals board.
Is joint council.
Pardon me?
We had a meeting the other night with joint council. What came out of that? Anything
I can't,
exceptional?
I can't hear you.
She can't do.
No, she didn't hear.
She's making reference to the joint meeting with the city council, the planning commission joint meeting with the city council last week. Whether there was any,
Are you referring to anything in particular?
no, is there anything that would be applicable to
I
our?
think the only thing that came up that might be of interest is in discussion of how we interpret the design guidelines for the city. Is that what you had in mind? And I think that it's pretty complicated. I think that if there was a simple list and one shoe fits all, you could say, okay, well, that's great. But the bottom line is that there's always a nuance and there's always a matter of interpretation on the design guidelines, because there are many, many statements in them, and many of them are not applicable to every project. And the reason that you have the people on the planning commission, I mean, we all have somewhat different backgrounds, but the majority of the people do have a design background. And I think it's really important that you have faith in those people, and you have faith in the process, and that you understand that it's not, the building has to be green and 3 feet high and 25 feet wide. It's not like that. That every building is different, and that every project is different, and you can build something to the letter of the law per se that can be horrible. And so, you know, if you say it's your opinion, well, then we might as well close every design school in the country, because if you've been to design school, you've been trained. You've been trained with color. You've been trained with proportion. You've been trained with balance. And it's very frustrating if you've done that and you've worked as a designer for many years to go through a process and then to have people in the community complain and write letters, and the letters are not reflective of what's happening in the process. And what it shows you is they don't understand the drawings, they don't understand what they're looking at, they're complaining about things being metal when they're actually wood, they're complaining about things that they don't understand. And sure, maybe they're worried, but then they should come to the meetings and they should listen and they should really do some homework or ask some questions. So I think for me, that was the major issue at that meeting. I think, you know, we talked about protocol and how to approach an issue. And I don't know if that was really the issue, or if the issue was that there was a lot of complaints. They wanted to just make sure that people were reassured that we were taking, you know, our job seriously and really doing the best job we can. I think we did. We'll look at it again.
I have a question.
Yes.
Since our next meeting is going to be addressing ADUs, is there anything from a planning commission perspective that you've encountered that is of something we should consider?
Well, the only issue
in our
I
recommendations
had
to council
in terms of a roadblock for this process was that $17,000 fee. And I went to the workshop in Santa Barbara with Senator Wykowski, and I brought that up, and they assured me that that fee was not legal, and that it was a burdensome fee and was against the state intention even before this new ADU ordinance, and that they were going to address it specifically. And then I brought that to the Planning Commission meeting. Bill Warwick was there, and he did some homework to see if I understood correctly what they told me. And in fact, he said, yes, that is what they determined. So I think that was a huge roadblock. The interesting thing at that workshop was that one of the reasons they held it was they wanted to find out what the roadblocks were that people were coming up against. And in fact, in certain communities, they would submit their application and way more than 120 days went by and nobody responded in any possible way. They just weren't giving out permits. That there are communities claiming that you can't build a second unit because they're too close to the coast, or that they're in a fire zone, or, you know, just a million different things. And there was one woman there who talked about trying to build a tiny addition onto her house to take an existing house, a portion of it, and make a second unit out of it. It already had all the plumbing, it already had everything, and then they were trying to make her put in a $23,000 new meter. And, you know, again, so it's happening in a lot of different places because I guess people are concerned about what the implications are of the ADUs. I like to take the approach that you put it in place, you have to assume that people are going to do the best job possible. Not everybody will. Most people, I think, will try. And that if problems come up, you know, instead of being a naysayer right from the beginning and saying, we can't do this, we can't do this, we can't do this, I think it's a lot better if we try and I think the ordinance that we wrote is good. I was very pleased with it. And I think, you know, we'll see how many people actually do it, what the implication of it is, if in fact there's a problem with people actually living in one portion or the other. Ventura had something I was reading about how the owner has to occupy the primary unit, and I think that's problematic because if you want to retire and you don't want to move out of your house and you want to move into a smaller unit because maybe there's just you and rent out the main house, that should be fine too. I don't see any problem with that.
And that's why I want the designation of the language, because you as the owner get to designate which one. It doesn't say the bigger, and it doesn't say the older. It says the primary. And so you can designate that. And so
I don't know
you're-
what that means then.
Well, it means you're not forced to live in one or the other. You get to choose which exemption you want.
Okay.
Okay? That's through the county. If we would adopt that and stay away from writing our own rules and adopting one, it removes that conflict.
Okay, well, that language wasn't really clear to me. So maybe it's not clear to other people as well.
Have you considered presenting your takeaways from the Senator Wykowski's presentation to the sanitary district
Well,
board?
I think that they're very serious about having this ordinance make a difference and actually be effective. And they're going to do whatever it takes to make sure that happens.
Yeah, I'm just curious, you mentioned that the senator said it was illegal for them to have collected the sanitation fees, is that it wasn't,
The sanitation fee?
yeah.
What's your question?
No, I thought that you had said that the senator had said that it was illegal for the
The
sanitation.
person who made that statement was the head of the Housing and Urban Development, and the senator agreed with him that it was a burdensome fee, and according to state ordinances, that's not allowed.
Okay. Because I was just wondering, the 40-some people that paid it, I mean,
What happens to that?
are they
It's
gonna-
not retroactive. Law
it's
is
not-
going to be retroactive. This one will not be an earth law.
not like
It will
the,
not be signed.
Well, it'd be interesting to,
It's 17.
okay. Because I know the school.
I mean, people have paid it since
School board-
2017, and I wouldn't be surprised if
The
they
school
try and
fees
get
were
it back.
refunded back for those people
Yes.
who paid that.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Another comment? Sure, thanks so much, Ms. Corbin.
The ADU issue is, I mean, we did 3 of them in Calabasas in the last 6 months. Every city has the same dilemma, all you have, trying to figure out all the ways to get around. These are just some things that pop up. Okay, I have a house, I want to add a little secondary unit to it. My electric meter now is not big enough. They're $6,000. My sewer's a 3-inch. They add another toilet. It has to be 4-inch. Now I got to put a new sewer in. There's another $10,000. My heating, I got a heater. I run a duct over there. I control your heating. Oh, now we got to put a heating unit in that second. There's another $8,000. So it's just not the sanitary district. It's basic minimum standard code items that are also a downsize for some of these secondary dwelling units. And they're all expensive. So it's not a cheap thing to do, no matter which way you look at it. It's not just the sand district. Goleta has 2 sand districts, and they're doing the same thing. They're charging an exorbitant rate. And they're claiming it's to cover the cost of down the line having to keep their treatment plant. Might be, might not. That's their profession.
That's a capacity charge.
I understand that, I understand that. So the smartest thing they could do is what they're trying to do now, which is fixture count or size square footage, which makes total sense. But anyway, just those are added costs to the ADU that most applicants haven't even thought about. Okay, so, and they can be $20,000 out of your pocket. So, you know, I do this as a side thing. I go and talk to people about this and kind of give them an idea so they figure out, you know, what's going to happen. And there's going to be more and more people that are contracting that service so that people get a real idea. If I'm going to convert my garage or I'm going to build an ADU next to my house, what's it really going to cost to do that? And it's not easy, and it's not just here, it's everywhere. So it's a big dilemma. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay. Adjourned. Thank you.
Oh, you could leave it, we'll grab them.